As House Atreides takes control of Arrakis, Paul's life changes forever. Let's recap everything from Dune Part 1. The story opens with Chani describing Arrakis as the desert home of the Fremen. Despite its beauty, her people have lived under House Harkonnen's cruel rule for generations. The Fremen keep fighting but have never defeated them. The Harkonnens grew rich by controlling spice, the most valuable substance in the universe. Because the desert is too dangerous during the day, spice is harvested at night, damaging the land. The Emperor eventually gives control of Arrakis to Duke Leto Atreides, ending Harkonnen rule. Far away on Caladan, Paul Atreides wakes after another troubled night. At breakfast, Lady Jessica reminds her son to wear formal clothing for an important ceremony later that day. She also has him practice the Bene Gesserit technique known as the voice by ordering someone to hand him a glass of water. Paul nearly succeeds, but the command comes out in his normal voice. Seeing how exhausted he looks, Jessica asks if the dreams have returned. Paul hides the truth, even though Chani has appeared in them again. As he prepares for life on Arrakis, Paul studies the planet and its people. He discovers that the Fremen survive the harsh desert with still suits that recycle their body's moisture. Water is so precious that giant sandworms dominate the landscape. These enormous creatures create spice, and the Fremen honor them as Shai Hulud, a sacred being. Long-term spice exposure has also turned their eyes bright blue. Because spice is essential for interstellar travel, losing access to it would cause countless people to die from withdrawal. Soon afterward, House Atreides gathers for an official ceremony. Alongside Leto, Jessica, and Paul stand the Emperor's representatives, including guild navigators. Their purpose is to formally hand stewardship of Arrakis to House Atreides, and Leto accepts the responsibility. Meanwhile, Duncan Idaho, Paul's swordmaster and mentor, prepares to travel to Arrakis alone on an advanced mission. Paul asks if he can come as well, and admits that his dreams keep showing Arrakis, the Fremen, and even Duncan's death. Duncan dismisses the visions as nothing more than dreams, and reassures Paul they'll meet again once the family arrives. Paul also asks his father for permission to join the mission, but he refuses. Leto explains that taking control of Arrakis has placed House Atreides in a dangerous political position, and Duncan's job is to earn the Fremen's trust. When Paul questions whether he's truly meant to lead Arrakis, Leto tells him that even if he never accepts that role, he'll always be what matters most, his son. Even so, Leto reminds him that real leaders don't seek power, they're called to it. Paul's combat training continues under Gurney Halleck, the Atreides military commander. Sparring with shield generators activated, Paul struggles to stay focused, while Gurney reminds him that the Harkonnens controlled Arrakis for 80 years and will never surrender it peacefully. Meanwhile, on Giedi Prime, Baron Vladimir Harkonnen receives a report from his nephew Rabban. The final Harkonnen forces have withdrawn from Arrakis, and House Atreides is about to arrive. Back on Caladan, Jessica wakes Paul because a Reverend Mother wants to meet him and question him about his dreams. Before the meeting begins, Dr. Yue performs a medical examination and quietly warns Paul in Mandarin that the Bene Gesserit always put their own goals first. Before Paul enters the room, Jessica urges him to rely on everything she has taught him. Inside, the Reverend Mother uses the voice to force him onto his knees. She orders him to place his hand inside a mysterious box, while a poisoned Gom Jabbar needle hovers beside his neck. Pulling his hand away means instant death, no matter how painful the experience becomes. Outside, Jessica quietly recites the litany against fear, while Paul endures unbearable pain. He overcomes his fear, begins seeing strange visions, and passes the test. Had he failed, they would have killed him, because someone with his power would be too dangerous. Afterward, the Reverend Mother asks about his dreams, and Paul mentions the girl he keeps seeing on Arrakis. She then criticizes Jessica for secretly training him and for giving birth to a son instead of the daughter the Bene Gesserit wanted for their breeding program. That daughter was meant to marry a Harkonnen heir. Jessica chose to give Leto the son he wanted, hoping Paul would become the long-awaited Kwisatz Haderach. Until then, every man who tried to gain that power with the Truthsayer drug had died. House Atreides finally reaches Arrakis after leaving Caladan, where they're welcomed with a grand arrival ceremony. Soon after landing, Paul meets Thufir Hawat, his father's master of assassins, and the two board an ornithopter to travel to the Atreides residence. Among the Fremen, many already believe Paul is the prophesied savior. Jessica explains that they know him as Lisan al-Gaib, the voice from the outer world, a figure from ancient Fremen prophecy. She admits the Bene Gesserit planted these legends generations ago. To Paul, it's obvious they created the prophecy only to manipulate the Fremen whenever it became useful. After settling in, Jessica selects a Fremen woman named Mapes to serve as her housekeeper. Realizing Mapes is hiding a weapon, Jessica identifies it as a crysknife, a sacred blade carved from a sandworm's tooth. According to Fremen tradition, anyone who sees the knife unsheathed must either be cleansed or die before leaving Arrakis. Satisfied, Mapes presents the weapon to Jessica. During a walk around the palace grounds, he notices a worker watering palm trees. The man explains that each tree consumes as much water as 5 people every day. Paul suggests using that water elsewhere, but the groundskeeper insists the trees are considered sacred. Paul, in his room, suddenly senses danger moments before a hunter-seeker darts toward him. Reacting instantly, he grabs the tiny assassination drone before it can burrow into his body and destroys it. Later, Thufir reports a Harkonnen agent behind the attack had been hiding inside the walls and was eliminated. Elsewhere, a Reverend Mother meets privately with Baron Harkonnen. Without saying much aloud, they confirm the Emperor will secretly provide Sardaukar troops to support the coming assault on House Atreides. She asks only one favor, that Jessica and Paul be spared and sent into exile. The Baron agrees, though once she's gone, he remarks that the desert itself will finish them off. During a strategy meeting, House Atreides discovers the Harkonnens deliberately sabotaged the spice operations before withdrawing, making production much harder. They also learn Arrakis has been stripped of its resources for years. To supervise the transfer of power, the Emperor has appointed Liet Kynes as Judge of the Change. Not long afterward, Duncan returns from the desert with important news. He reveals the Fremen population numbers in the tens of millions rather than the 50,000 the Harkonnens estimated. He also brings the Fremen leader Stilgar to the meeting. Stilgar distrusts the Atreides, believing they're just more outsiders after the spice. Leto promises to protect the Fremen and respect their homes. While leaving, Stilgar reveals that he already knows who Paul is. Before taking the group into the desert, Kynes equips everyone with still suits and explains they'll be observing spice harvesting firsthand. When she asks Paul if he's ever worn one before, he admits he hasn't. Even so, he instinctively puts it on the proper way. Surprised, Kynes quietly remarks in the Fremen language that he wears it like someone born among them. They fly across the desert in an ornithopter to watch a spice crawler at work. Since the machine's vibrations attract sandworms, a carryall normally arrives to lift it away. This time, however, the carryall malfunctions and fails to pick it up. Refusing to abandon the workers, Leto launches an emergency rescue. While standing in the open desert, Paul suddenly hears mysterious voices whispering. The Kwisatz Haderach awakes. The vision distracts him until Gurney pulls him aboard moments before a giant sandworm devours the crawler. Leto concludes the failed rescue was another act of Harkonnen sabotage. After returning, Dr. Yue examines Paul following his heavy exposure to spice. Although Paul isn't suffering an allergic reaction, he tells Jessica about another vision. In it, Chani leads him into a Sayich, they share a kiss, and he dies. He also knows someone will eventually hand him a blade. Then Paul shocks Jessica by revealing she's pregnant, despite the pregnancy only beginning a few weeks earlier. She confirms he's right. Far away on Seleucus Secundus, the Emperor's Sardaukar forces prepare for battle, with 3 battalions assigned to the Baron. Jessica later approaches Leto to discuss Paul, but Leto speaks first, saying his son hasn't been the same since meeting the Reverend Mother. Fearing what lies ahead, he asks Jessica to keep Paul safe if anything happens to him. Later that night, Leto quietly admits he regrets never marrying her. Darkness falls, and the attack begins. 2 guards are gunned down before Leto notices flashes of light outside. Unable to reach security, he realizes something has gone terribly wrong. He discovers Mapes dead on the floor, just before a dart slips through his shield and knocks him unconscious. At the same time, Gurney realizes the defenses have been breached and rushes to organize the soldiers. Missiles slam into the city. Fierce fighting erupts across Arrakis. Dr. Yue confesses to Leto that he turned against House Atreides in hopes of rescuing his wife from the Baron. Before leaving, he secretly hands Leto a poisoned false tooth, explaining that crushing it in the Baron's presence will release a deadly gas. As a final promise, Yue says he will make sure Paul has a chance to survive. At the same time, Paul and Jessica are captured and loaded into an ornithopter, where they're meant to be abandoned in the desert. Duncan steals another ornithopter and escapes. While in the air, Paul successfully uses the voice for the first time. He and Jessica force their captors to turn on one another, and Jessica finishes off the last remaining guard. Free once again, they reach the desert and witness their new home being consumed by flames. Captured and tied to a chair, Leto is brought before the Baron, who calmly eats. Yue reminds him of the promise to release his wife, but the Baron reveals she died long ago. He then murders Yue as well, saying he can now be reunited with her. Declaring that House Atreides will perish before the night is over, the Baron mocks Leto. In response, Leto crushes the poison tooth, releasing a lethal cloud that kills nearly everyone around him. Among the supplies Yue prepared, Paul discovers a message, along with his father's ducal ring. While sheltering inside a tent, spice fills the air and triggers intense visions. He sees Chani, a future version of himself fighting in battle, and a galaxy-wide holy war carried out in his name. Overwhelmed by anger, Paul blames Jessica and the Bene Gesserit for what he has become. Grieving over his father's fate, he finally accepts the ring and puts it on. Elsewhere in the desert, Duncan meets Kynes, who explains she was ordered to ignore everything taking place. Duncan immediately realizes the Emperor arranged for House Atreides to be wiped out. After leaving the tent, Paul and Jessica reunite with Duncan, who respectfully greets Paul as the new Duke after mourning Leto's death. Learning that Sardaukar soldiers fought alongside the Harkonnens, Jessica understands the Emperor secretly backed the invasion. Since Kynes is helping them despite those orders, she's risking her own life. She then leads them to an abandoned ecological station before the sandstorm arrives. Paul argues that every great house lives in fear of the Sardaukar and that only a united alliance could challenge the Imperium. He asks Kynes to testify that the Emperor betrayed House Atreides. She warns such evidence would only ignite a war, so Paul suggests a different path, a political marriage, since the Emperor has no male heir. Kynes admits the Emperor targeted House Atreides because he feared their growing influence. Though still skeptical, she listens as Paul speaks of the Fremen prophecy, reveals he saw her in his visions, and says Arrakis could one day become a paradise. Soon, the Sardaukar discover their hiding place. Paul tries to stop Duncan, but Duncan locks them inside and stays behind to buy them time. He kills many Sardaukar before being fatally stabbed. Even then, he gets back up, takes down a few more, and finally dies. Before sending Paul and Jessica away in an ornithopter, Kynes vows to expose the Emperor's betrayal before the Landsraad. Once they're gone, the Sardaukar execute her for treason. With her dying strength, she summons Shai-Hulud by creating vibrations in the sand, and the giant sandworm devours everyone around her. Although Leto released the poison gas, the Baron survives and recovers by soaking in a pool of dark healing liquid. Rabban assures him that Paul and Jessica could never have survived the open desert. Believing the threat is over, the Baron orders the extermination of every Fremen. As they escape, Jessica notices enemy signal flares behind them. Their ornithopter is caught inside a violent sandstorm, suffers heavy damage, and eventually crash lands. Paul and Jessica survive the crash and take cover among nearby rocks. Wearing the stillsuits Kynes gave them, they continue across the desert toward the Fremen siege Duncan described. Paul teaches Jessica the special Fremen walking style that avoids attracting sandworms. Even so, a massive worm appears and heads straight toward them. They flee, but the creature suddenly changes direction at the last moment. Paul realizes someone nearby activated a thumper to draw it away. A group of Fremen led by Stilgar soon appears. Some of his people want to kill Paul and Jessica to claim the water in their bodies, but Stilgar refuses. He believes surviving an encounter with Shai-Hulud proves they deserve respect, especially since a Fremen thumper saved them. He allows Paul to stay and learn the Fremen way of life, though he believes Jessica is too old to do the same. That decision sparks a dispute. After Jessica easily overpowers Stilgar, Jamis questions whether Stilgar should remain leader. Paul volunteers to fight Jamis as Jessica's champion. Before the duel begins, Chani hands him a crysknife, convinced he will lose but hoping he'll meet death honorably. According to Fremen tradition, the duel cannot end until one fighter dies. Paul has never taken a life before, yet he has no choice but to kill Jamis to survive. Stilgar officially accepts Paul into the Fremen. The movie ends as Jessica asks for safe passage back to Caladan, but Paul refuses, believing his future lies in the desert. Together with the Fremen, they begin the journey towards Siege Tabor. If you want more recaps like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and let me know what series or movie you want to see next.